One thing that's always really interested me and fascinated me is the study of psychology. It's just really I don't know, it's just really fascinating for me. And it's just struck me that as unique and as amazing as we all think we are, and just these perfect little individuals that are so unique, it's like, well, we're actually all very, very predictable. It seems like if you study a little bit of psychology, and all of a sudden, you just start to discover so many predictabilities about people. You're still special, don't worry, but there's also some pretty predictable things about us, apparently. One of the things, though, that has fascinated me very much in psychology is this phenomenon called cognitive dissonance. Okay, so cognitive dissonance is when what you believe doesn't match up with what you do. Like you know something is true, or at least you believe it to be true, which is, in psychology, the same thing. You at least believe it's true. But then when you look at your actions don't match up with what you either know is true or believe to be true. Like, for example, like we all know that diet and exercise, I use this all the time, but we know that diet and exercise is a good thing. It's good to be healthy, all that. But then when we look at our actions, it's like, well, is it that important? I don't know. Or just kind of like on a comedic side, we all know that if you step on a crack, it's not going to break your mother's back. We know that, right? And yet, there's some 40 and 50-year-olds that still are avoiding cracks on the sidewalk. They're like, watch out for that. You're crazy. That's what that means. Okay. Or just think about it. How many times, and this gets more embarrassing as you get older, you turn off the lights in the basement and you sprint up the stairs. You don't believe in monsters, but do you? Come on. So it's the same thing, because you can reverse engineer it, and that's what a psychologist will do, right? They can't literally see into your head, but they'll look at your actions and be like, well, you say you don't believe in monsters, but you keep telling me about you sprinting upstairs when you turn off the light downstairs. So are you sure you don't believe in monsters? Because it seems like you do. Or it's like they can watch you avoiding cracks on the sidewalk and be like, again, I know you don't actually believe this, but technically you do. And you can do that with anything. Okay, cognitive dissonance, it's a fun thing. There's a lot of funny examples, obviously, but it also then applies very much to our real life and to the important things and the most important things in our life, in particular when it comes to our faith. Again, you just think about what we talked about for the past 4 weeks, right? We've had that whole series on the church and how we all believe in the church. I believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Great. We all say we believe that. But then when we start letting the rubber hit the road, the question is, well, but do we actually believe that? Or is there a sort of cognitive dissonance? Again, think of the example. Think if, again, the church is apostolic. We're all like, I believe that. But the church being apostolic means that the successors to the apostles, the bishops, have a real authority, a real ability to teach us and to lead us and to guide us. And sometimes when that rubber hits the road, we start going, I don't know about that. We talked about how the church is Catholic and how that means that as Catholic means according to the whole. We believe everything that's been given to us by Jesus in the church. And yet, there's that cognitive dissonance we call cafeteria Catholics, where you just kind of pick and choose what you want. And so it's a very real thing when it even comes to our faith. One classic example, and I want to start a new series based on this one, is what comes up twice in our readings today. Okay, twice. In the Old Testament reading from Deuteronomy, we have the origin of this phrase, this prayer. And then in the New Testament, Jesus quotes it again and says, this is the greatest commandment. Okay, this is what we call the Shema. Okay, Shema is Hebrew for hear, and it's just the first word of this prayer. Okay, this prayer is a prayer that the Jewish people, even to this day, they pray this prayer twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. And then also, as Moses told them, they literally fasten it to their doorpost. So if you go to a good, faithful Jewish home, you'll see a weird little box attached to the door of their house. What's that is just a little piece of paper rolled up and stuck in that little box, which just has this prayer written on it. This is the prayer. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is Lord alone. Therefore you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind, and with all of your strength. The Jews would pray that twice a day. Jesus himself, a good faithful Jew had grown up, would pray that twice a day. Why? Because Moses told them, but also as Jesus points out today, this is the first and this is the greatest commandment. Okay, so my incredibly profound homily series, and let's be honest, they're all pretty amazing. Let's just point that out. Pretty brilliant. But this one is going to take the cake. It's a whole 2 words. Ready? Gut check. It's my brilliant homily for the next 4 weeks. Gut check. Okay, gut check. Do we actually love God with all of our heart and with all of our soul and with all of our mind and with all of our strength? Because we all, again, if you're a good little Catholic and I gave you the test, you'd all check the box that says yes, because that's the right answer. But it's the gut check. It's the gut check of do I actually live that? We all believe it. But then there's that cognitive dissonance that slips in where it's like, I know I said I believe that, but I don't know. Again, reverse it. If someone were to look at our lives, if someone looked at our life, would they go, oh my gosh, that person definitely loves God with all of their heart, with all of their soul, with all of their mind, and with all of their strength. Look at them. That's the question. So it's just a big gut check. This is the greatest commandment. But how are we living that out? Again, I'm going to chuck myself under the bus because it's way more fun when I do that before I start throwing stones around the glass house. So again, you all know my story. You know it very well. You're so annoyed by it. And it's very easy, though, for me to hide behind it. It's very easy for me to stand up and say, well, I wanted to grow up and be a doctor and get married, have 12 kids, but then God called me, a lot of hemming and hawing, didn't want to do it, but then I finally went. I became a priest, and I lived happily ever after. It's easy for me to stand up here and say that. And then you all go, man, look at that father. Man, really gave his life to God. He must love God so much, loves him so much. So it's very easy for me to hide behind that. And again, like I said, you guys do it for me. You all go, man, Father, look at that young priest. I could never do that. Father, you must love God so much. And I can go, yeah, you're right. I really do. Look at that. I'm pretty great at this. And I'm just really crushing it up here. It's easy for me to do that. Easy. But, just so you know, God doesn't let me get away with it. Every single year of my priesthood, right? I've been a priest for 6.5 years now. For 6.5 years, at least once a year, there's one passage from Scripture that always somehow finds its way right into my lap. Like I'll be at a talk and somebody speaking will bring it up, or I'll be reading a book and it's brought up in the book. I literally had someone text it to me on a Tuesday morning because they were interested in it, but I was just like, there it is again. But this is God. He simply hands this to me, just as a little gentle reminder, like, come on, Michael, let's get this together. And it's a passage from the 2nd chapter of the book of Revelation. Okay, so as you're all aware, I'm sure, the book of Revelation starts off with these 7 letters to the 7 churches, and John, God, speaking through the Apostle John, is telling them a few things that they need to work on. Famously, there's that letter to the Laodiceans, and God says, you're neither hot nor cold. Since you're lukewarm, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. That's the famous one that everyone knows. The one, though, that always gets handed to me is the letter to the church in Ephesus. Okay, and in that letter, it starts off real encouraging, right? It starts off like this. John writes this to the church in Ephesus. I know your works, your good works. I know your toil. I know your patient endurance. I know that you're enduring patiently and bearing all things for my name's sake, and you've not grown weary. All right, so again, it starts off very encouraging. John's saying, I know how hard you're working over there. I know all the stuff that you endure. And what he means is you're enduring persecution. I know that you're taking care of your families. I know that you're making sure that the gospel is being preached. I know that you're taking care of the poor. You guys are working so hard. You're doing so great. They're very encouraging. They're doing all of God's work, keeping the faith. But then the letter continues. And John says this, I know your works. I know your toil, your patient endurance. But I hold this against you. You have lost your first love. You've lost your first love. Right? And that's the line that God always gently hands me at least once a year. He's like, Mike, I know you're working hard. I know you're doing all these good things. No one's doubting that. No one debates that. But just one thing. You've lost your first love. Okay, so as I was praying with this passage from the gospel this week, this Jesus quoting the greatest commandment over and over and over again, praying with it, trying to find it, like myself not getting convicted by it, what continued to come up is how Jesus makes a distinction, and he says the first commandment is this: love God with your whole heart, mind, soul, and strength. And then he says, and the second one, is love your neighbor as yourself. Make sure that you do all those good things, sure. But the first commandment is this: don't lose sight of it. Okay, when we were in seminary, just to chuck myself under the bus one more time, there was this bishop that came to preach, and when a bishop comes, that usually means it's going to be really boring, and you're just like, please don't preach for 45 minutes like you always do. But this guy preached for 5 minutes and got out of there, and we were like, oh man. And it was a real punch in the gut, and it was so good that we all wanted it, so he just sent it out to the whole community. And I've kept it in my breviary, my prayer book that I have, just so I can go back to it every once in a while. But he said this, gentlemen, when you get out into your parishes, in your future ministry, the demands will be great, and you will have your schedules filled with appointments and commitments, and so many of them will be good things, worthy things, holy things. Your calendars will fill, people will clamor for your attention, but then a time's going to come when you'll hear it, and you'll hear it again and again and again from the people. Oh, Father, I know you're so busy. I don't want to bother you. And he said this, I know that then you'll feel a sense of pride, a sense of accomplishment. You're busy. You're doing good things. But brothers, I'm here to tell you, don't be deceived. It's not a compliment. It's not a good sign when people fear you're so busy that they can no longer ask you to pause from your busyness. Okay. This letter really called me out, and still does to this day, because it's very easy for me, because I don't know if you knew this, my job 24/7 is to be the priest and like do all the Jesus stuff. So like, it's very easy for me to hide behind that second commandment and be like, look, God, I'm doing all of these good things. I'm a busy guy because I'm loving my neighbor as myself. I'm doing all of these good and holy and worthy things. And then God goes, great, I see it. You're crushing it. But just one thing. Don't you see that sometimes you've lost your first love? And that you've lost sight of what's most important, which is just God himself. Right? That's something that I get called out, and God calls me out on it quite regularly. That I easily slide into just focusing on doing all these good things, which are good. But I lose sight of loving God above all things. Okay? So the question then is, I wonder if there's not a few of us who don't know that and feel that too. Because this is the point, again, how many of us make incredibly great sacrifices for our families and for our work and for our communities. And think of all the things you do for your kids, all the stuff you do at work, all the stuff you do within the community. And they're good things, worthy things, holy things too. Think about all the stress, the anxiety, the sleepless nights you've had because you're taking care of the people that you love. Think of all the working and the working and the working to make ends meet. Think of all the stuff that you do, the practices you take your kids to. Think of all the good, the worthy things that you do. And those are good things. But then I'd invite you just to listen to that letter to the church in Ephesus. Again, listen to the Lord saying, I see it all, and you're doing great. You're doing so many good things. But I hold this against you sometimes. You've lost your first love. You've lost sight of loving me because you're just focusing on doing other good things. Again, what I'm getting at is oftentimes we can sidestep our love for God in order to take care of that second commandment of taking care of others. And again, no one here, I don't think anyone will raise your hand maybe. Let's just call you out right now. Raise your hand if you hate God. Okay, nobody. Great. Okay. Nobody hates God here. And yet, I just invite you to reflect on if maybe God has kind of gotten placed second to other things that are, again, good things. Loving your neighbor as yourself is a commandment. But has maybe God been placed second? I know this can sound a little scandalous, but even like, do we love our kids more than we love God? I know that can sound bad. But do we love our kids more than we love God? I'm not yelling at anybody, ready? I'm going to be as gentle as I can. But one easy example, just because it was 2 days ago, just one simple example. We're not yelling at anybody. I'm not mad. It's going to be okay. One simple example is 2 days ago was All Saints Day. Okay, All Saints Day is what we call a holy day of obligation. This is a day where, out of love for God, we're obliged to come to Mass. Great, beautiful. I also know that the day before that was Halloween, and then Friday there was a bunch of schools that had no school that day. That's fantastic. I wish I had that as a kid. Then there was games on Friday nights. Beautiful, great. Again, did we make sure that our kids all went trick-or-treating? Awesome. Free candy, one of the best things of the year. Love it. Did we make sure that kids on their day off of school had stuff to do all day? Great, fantastic. Do we make sure that Friday night kids got to games, we all went to the games to make sure we cheered our teams on? Great. Those are all good things. But in the midst of it, did we forget that our first love, our first priority is to God? Did we make sure to model that for our kids, that, yeah, there's a lot of other good things going on, but first and foremost, we need to make sure we take care of our love for God? And there's a billion more examples we can give. That was just the most recent one. But that's the simple gut check. And it's just a gut check. We do many, many, many good things in life. Many good things. But the gut check is, do I love the Lord with all of my heart, with all of my mind, with all of my soul, and with all of my strength? Again, I fail in that just as much as anybody else. It's a gut check for me every single day too. But that's the simple invitation from the readings today. So over the next couple of weeks, I want to dig into that of just how do we live that out? Because yes, as some of you are already thinking, you're already trying to get ahead of me, you're like, well, Father, I love God by loving my family. And we'll get to that. We will, I promise you. But for today, I just want us to kind of sit with the uncomfortability of, do I love God with all of my heart, with all of my soul, with all of my mind, and with all of my strength? That's the first and the greatest commandment. And so my simple invitation for this week is just to let that begin to sink in. As the prayer says, hear, O Israel, hear, listen to this one first. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is Lord alone. Therefore you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your mind, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. I'll just invite you to go back to the gospel and just read it a couple more times. Pray with it this week. And then just begin to listen. Listen to how the Lord might be inviting you to take one more step in your love for him.